Hidden deep beneath the crumbling foundation of a Gothic ruin in Kentucky lies a concrete chute. It drops 500 feet straight down into the earth. It was designed for a single grim purpose: to slide human corpses out of the building in total silence. This extreme level of secrecy was a response to the White Plague. At the turn of the 20th century, tuberculosis was tearing through the United States, and doctors had no way to stop it. Louisville, Kentucky sat directly in the crosshairs. Built on low-lying, swampy terrain near the Ohio River, the city cultivated a damp environment for respiratory illness. Its mortality rates quickly became some of the highest in the entire nation. Highly contagious and entirely incurable, the disease forced the state's hand. Public health officials realized they couldn't treat the plague, so they had to isolate it. Local medical facilities were transformed into strict quarantine zones to pull the dying away from the general population. What started in 1910 as a modest 2-story wooden clinic was rapidly overrun by the sick. By 1926, the state replaced it with a colossal stone fortress known as Waverly Hills. Designed to house hundreds of patients at a time, the facility operated as a self-contained city. It had its own power plant, a post office, and a working farm. Once a patient was admitted, they were stripped of their former lives and locked into an institutional routine with zero contact with the outside world. Before the invention of antibiotics, medical science offered exactly one prescribed treatment: constant exposure to fresh air and sunshine. This meant patients were wheeled out onto these open-air porches year-round. Even in the dead of winter, with snow blowing through the unglazed windows, the sick were left outside in heavy wool blankets to breathe the freezing air. Despite the grand Tudor Gothic architecture, Waverly Hills functioned as an elegant, freezing cage. Patients were simply held here, waiting to see if their bodies could defeat the bacteria, or if they would succumb to it. For many, the fresh air was not enough. As the infection progressed and the death toll mounted, doctors crowded into operating theaters and resorted to brutal, experimental interventions. One common procedure was the thoracoplasty. Surgeons would physically remove up to 8 of a patient's ribs. Stripped of its skeletal support, the chest wall would cave in, physically forcing the diseased lung to collapse and rest. Another severe tactic was the pneumothorax. Doctors would surgically open the chest cavity, insert a rubber balloon, and inflate it to compress the infected lung tissue. Lacking chemical medicine to fight the bacteria, surgery became a horrific endurance test. The procedures were agonizing, and the survival rates remained incredibly grim. At the height of the epidemic, casualties inside the facility reached a staggering rate of nearly 1 death every hour. This created an acute psychological crisis. If the living patients out on the open-air porches constantly watched hearses pulling up to the front doors, morale would collapse. Doctors believed depression would accelerate the disease. To solve this, the hospital staff devised an architectural workaround. A steep 500-foot subterranean tunnel, originally built to haul coal up the hill, was retrofitted with a motorized cable gurney. Night after night, orderlies strapped the deceased to this gurney and lowered them down the chute. At the bottom of the hill, completely hidden from the balconies above, cars waited at a secluded railway siding to carry the bodies away in the dark. The hospital's very foundation was repurposed to orchestrate a visual cover-up. By swallowing thousands of bodies in secret, the institution maintained a fragile illusion of hope for the living. In January of 1937, torrential rains triggered the worst flood in Louisville's history. The Ohio River swallowed the valley and submerged nearly 70. The specific human stories of thousands of the deceased vanished, leaving behind a massive historical void. 6 years later, in 1943, researchers discovered the antibiotic streptomycin. For the first time, doctors had a drug that could actively kill the tuberculosis bacteria. Almost overnight, the necessity for extreme isolation vanished. cases plummeted, the plague retreated, and the colossal stone fortress was left an empty shell, stripped of its history. Following a brief stint as a geriatric facility and its forced closure in 1981, Waverly Hills was abandoned. Water damage, freezing winters, and vandals slowly consumed the sprawling ruin. Instead of records lost to the 1937 flood, only bureaucratic architectural inventories remain. These archives provide clinical data on stonework and construction dates. They detail the building's skeleton, but offer no names, remaining silent on the 5,000 lives ended inside. When documented history is erased, folklore often moves in to fill the silence. The most persistent legends of Room 502 and the shadow figures in the hallways gain traction in the same vacuum left by the lost medical files. These ghost stories have become a way for the public to engage with a tragedy that was never properly memorialized. In the absence of actual facts, society's collective memory has substituted bureaucratic silence with the supernatural. Today, the property operates as a destination for dark tourism. Thousands of global visitors travel to Louisville each year to navigate the ruins and descend the concrete body chute by the beams of flashlights. Researchers describe this as a liminal space, a boundary zone that allows people to safely confront universal fears regarding isolation, incurable disease, and death. Walking these corridors and repeating the legends has become a modern method of processing a horrific history that science eventually moved past. Waverly Hills stands as a solemn monument to the extremes of early medicine and the resilience of the thousands who fought the White Plague. The legacy of the death tunnel rests in its cold utility, a logistical conveyor for a history that almost slipped away. Look past the myths to find the darker, true history beneath,